Welcome, thrivers around the globe, to our podcast series. Of today's topic and our guest today will blow up your mind. Maybe not literally, but at least it will igniting quite a bit. We have the one and only Wes Bush, the founder of Product-Led and the creator of the PLG system. He's got a new book launching up very soon, and we decided, why not talk about it, critique it, praise it, and learn from it. We have three moderators on the call here. We have Vincent Young. He's the VP of Dealfront, and he's also an author of a book called as Product-Led Sales. Peter recently bought it. I have bought the Kindle version of it. I'm still reading it. I have Peter, who's also a moderator from the famed Peter-Led Growth. By the way, Peter, you and I are the only people here on the call who do not have books on our names. So we should probably open up. There you go. There you go. You might be on mute, Peter. Okay, there you go. So it looks like Peter and I, we might have to open up our chat GPT and write up our own books, if you will. So Wes, welcome to the podcast. It's 3 against 1. You are the resident expert, and the three of us are knowledge seekers. So we're going to go around the table and ask you some questions. Some of us have had the privilege to read your book, but a lot of your posts on LinkedIn and various places are much revealing on what you're thinking about. So there you go. Wes, do you want to quickly touch upon, introduce maybe yourself? The three of us are moderators, so we will refrain from introducing, but you're our primary guest. So take a minute to introduce yourself and give us your inspiration of why are you writing a second book?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my name's Wes Bush. I am the bestselling author of the book Product-Led Growth. And I spend my entire day-to-day basically helping companies build and scale their PLG motions. And so over the last 9 years, we've helped over 400 plus companies scale their PLG motions, get a lot of self-serve revenue, and we've helped generate over $1 billion in self-serve revenue for our clients. And so why I decided to write that next book was because, well, we have helped a lot of people, but if I'm being honest, after analyzing, this was about a year and a half ago, there was 324 plus customers we're going through and just trying to identify who are the most successful ones and who's not successful and why is that? And so we started digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And what kind of came out of that is, one, who leads the PLG initiative really, really matters. And two, there's these 9 core patterns that we kept seeing again and again that if you align them, you understand them really well, then your odds of building a successful product-led business skyrocket. And so this book was really just me trying to understand and unpack what is the predictable way to build and scale a product-led business. And I wanted to know, I gotta get a better hit rate every single year. That's my goal at Product-Led. Every time we take on a new client, I want it to be successful, and I just want to improve that success rate every single time.
You have a big fan following, Wes, and some of the quotes, and about 3 or 4 days back, you've been sending various LinkedIn posts. There are 3 or 4 things that just remind me. The first one here, you mentioned that 97% of the buyers want to try before they buy. But in your book, and I have the privilege to read, I skimmed through that a little bit, or at least ingrain as much as I can. You made a distinction between buyers and users. So that's the first thing that's going on in my head. The second thing that you mentioned about is more and more recently, more and more PLG companies who were PLG first are moving away. Your primary quote in the book was only 5% of the PLG companies have achieved more than 10 million self-serve revenue. And it's very difficult for them to sustain, which is why they are probably moving away. And the big quote that you open your book is, right now, the survival rate for product-led companies is shockingly low, with most of them are just trying to sustain themselves and adapting to the sales-led approach rather than a PLG approach. Maybe could you help us a little bit to understand? Your book centers around that people are struggling with PLG implementation. And then you touch upon various aspects about the failure rates are high, people are giving up, it's very, very difficult to implement. But yet the market needs the try before you buy or the self-educate. Maybe enlighten us a little bit about that. All of these are really cross-wiring trends. And one side, market wants it, but the other side, the SaaS builders are not able to meet the market demand. Maybe we'll start with that, and then we'll go to Vincent he's got some amazing questions on that. But maybe Wes, could you open with this one?
Yeah, for sure. So on that end, yes, it's very hard to build a product-led business. We've seen a lot of companies just struggle with how to actually do it. And what actually pisses me off the most, which goes back to that reason of like why I decided to write this book and why it was such like a labor of love in a way, is because I would see a lot of times in a market where it's like the sales-led company would win out. They have an inferior product, yet they would win. And I was like, this frustrates me because like the product-led company, the founder is like, they got the better product, everything else, but they have this like rickety go-to-market motion that's not producing the results they need to sustain this. And so it really is just like frustrating, but like, why is that the case? And that's what I was trying to unpack. I was like, what is going on? And it's in the book at the very, I think it's chapter 3. I call it like, it's a trap at the end of the day. It's like when you try and think about product-led growth, most people fall into this one trap, which is they just do product-led growth. And that sounds like, of course, you should be doing that. That's a good idea. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you just do product-led growth, you need to actually have that organization to support it. Because the best product-led companies, it's like, what makes them really thrive is the organization is built to support a world-class PLG motion. And so it's a bit of like a reverse engineering of like, how do we, like, for instance, if you want a plant to grow, you need to give it like what? Lots of water, good amount of sun, depending on the plant. But like, that's the same for your PLG motion. So it's just thinking through that. And so that's really what the book is about. How do you create that environment?
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to put it. So I think we'll touch upon like maybe 3 or 4 areas today, right? So the first one is you mentioned about the onboarding is a struggle, right, for more and more companies. You also mentioned about that pricing and packaging is a big struggle. You've written about freemium versus free trial versus reverse trial versus many other things out there. So we'll touch upon that. Getting data, getting who's using what and what are they using. It's very difficult to go find out. And we'll touch upon the product-led growth organization. So why don't we start with maybe Peter? Peter, you have some questions about onboarding. Okay, good. Take it away. Oh, okay. All right. So we'll come back. Vincent, do you want to go next? Touch upon the pricing and packaging?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, well, as you know,
all right, now let's try. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back. Thank you.
All right. Let's do it. Let's do Peter's part.
Sorry, we'll get it all in post. So Wes, you had made a statement about product-led being a marketing motion. We had an earlier session where we were trying to figure out what product-led really meant. And I liked you had this analogy about a plant and having it grow and all the steps that you take in it. It's nurturing. It's a common thread, common term between marketing and what is it, botany? Yeah, so there we go, growing plants. The onboarding process, is it just signups? Is it just about getting people onto the product? Is it about getting people into the product? What are they doing in the product? What do we talk about when we talk about onboarding?
Well, I think like onboarding, the best part to start that discussion is kind of like, where does it begin? And I always am a big fan of thinking like it's the first interaction with your brand. It could be an ad, it could be lighting on your homepage, or it's the first blog post they find if they search for you. So like from that moment where they find out about you, that's when onboarding starts. And when does it end? It never ends. It's one of those things where like as you introduce more features, as you build out the product, you should always be kind of educating them. And so, yeah, in the book though, I do focus a lot on that first time onboarding experience because at the end of the day, like you will usually lose like on average 40 to 60% of users in that first time. Once they sign up, they're just not going to come back again and again. So yeah, it might seem that way. Like I think that's only where onboarding matters, but that's just whenever we work with our clients, like that's where you get the biggest impact. So we usually focus there.
I'm going to keep referencing the other book that you did with RJ.
Yes, at least product-led onboarding book.
There we go. Yeah, we're just going to, if I'm going to lean into onboarding, I might as well take one of the Bibles of it and do it. So first impressions, that's what matters. Is it a first impression every time a user logs in? Is it a first impression every time an email shows up? What are the touch points that are most critical? What are the touch points that we could ignore? Because product-led, Vincent went into this in great detail. It's a huge undertaking. It's like having a second company inside of your company to do something. Can we take shortcuts?
I mean, you can try. You can always try and take a shortcut, but like, is that going to be the most effective way to roll it out? I think like going back to, can you have like multiple go-to-market motions and everything else like that too? Some people might not agree, but I would say usually below like 10 mil range, like pick one. Don't try and do both. Eventually, like you could always layer on, like Vincent would know this better than anybody, like the product-led sales motion, everything else like that too. But I have seen a lot of companies where they will try and do PLG. Like let's say they go from like a sales-led company, they try and introduce a product-led motion. They don't really have any sort of like self-serve motion going on. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to get people to value on that end. That's probably not going to work out, because the core tenet of being product-led is serve before you sell. And so how can you get people to actually understand what your product is all about if you don't have good onboarding, you don't get people to value pretty quickly? That's really hard to pull off unless you just go the sales side route.
Serve before you sell. So it's pretty critical. You can't just say I'm doing PLG because I have a sign-up form and somebody can live demo the product. PLG is about...
Yeah. Like that's the first thing. Like, and that was actually like part of that. It's a trap piece for the PLG. It's like what we identified when we analyzed all the companies. It's like, okay, so what are the top things they're doing when they say, I'm doing PLG? First one is they decided to have like a free trial, freemium model or something like that. So they have a free model. Second one is they think a bit more about their onboarding. Third is their pricing. It has to be somewhat like transparent. And then the last one is just they got to have like that landing page offer that actually like promotes it. So when people were saying we're doing PLG, that's exactly what they were doing, those four things. But that's also why it wasn't working. It's because there's all these other things that are really important that support that in different ways.
I don't even know where to go with that. It all seems self-evident. GP, are you doing this with ThriveStack?
We are doing it. And I think here's my experiences. I've been in sales-led companies before, build products for them. And I think what Wes is saying, I'm able to maybe contrast this. In a sales-led company before, we would go build a product. There was almost no onboarding. The sales guy would call up the customer and say, hey, which of these are the use cases that we support? Which of these use cases you want to do a proof of concept with? So give them a list of things and then say, hey, these are my success criteria, use case 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the sales guy would call up the engineering team. Hey, please create a new tenant or a new account for this potential customer or as a prospect or a lead. And then somebody would send that email to him. There's no email coming out from the system. The sales guy would say, hey, here's the URL. I've already invited you with this login. And these are the use cases that are enabled. Here's an Excel sheet of the success criteria. Boom. And then you get on a call with them. You walk them through, connect them to various systems. It would take days and days for the customer and our team to go connect. For example, in our case, it was a cloud security product. Hey, go connect with your GitHub instance, go connect with your AWS accounts, go do these things. And then there was so much of setup that needs to happen before all the use cases would come in. So I can clearly understand what Wes is saying, that in the sales-led world, all of that is handled by the sales guy. But in the product-led world, the user is the one who's coming and signing up to your product. And he's not telling you that these are all the use cases that he's looking for. He's trying to self-discover that. And I think it's very self-evident when sales guy is in control, he can manage that. But if the user is in control, your product needs to manage that. Very, very difficult to do. Very, very difficult to do. Especially if you want to add a new feature or you want to add a new module. And for that, you had to again build in whole onboarding experiences, right? So which means that every single use case, every single feature, you had to build your onboarding experiences. Now that makes life extremely difficult for the product team to go build it, but it's also extremely difficult for the marketing team, the sales team, the CSM team to go support it. But once it's done, it's amazing, but it's very difficult to build. Am I saying it right, Wes? Is that your experience as well? That onboarding per use case, too difficult to build, and the sales-led versus the product-led approaches towards onboarding are drastically poles apart.
No, I mean, there's a ton of overlap between the two. I think regarding these two different issues, like sales-led, product-led, good onboarding is, I hope, underlying core between both of them. I think a lot of times it's just how it's embodied. Like in a sales-led company, the people are the machine. That's how it is. It's like you are going to grow with hiring more salespeople and they have X pump and quota. You hire more people. When it comes to onboarding, it's like, okay, let's hire another CSM and they'll take on the onboarding. And so it's a lot more people oriented. Whereas in a product-led company, it's like, hey, listen, we can't do that. And that's not realistic. We're charging $10 a month. Something crazy. Like it doesn't always have to be that low. But on that part of the use case, it's like we got to be very intentional with understanding who is our ideal user. That's actually one of those 9 components of the product-led system, where it's like, it's not the buyer, it's the user. And you got to know that person really, really well, because that onboarding experience has to be based on them. What you give away for free has to be based around what you're going to give them, and what does that level up for them. That onboarding experience has to be based around them. Now, the founders that I see succeed with product-led, they're the ones that are actually a little ruthless when it comes to picking and choosing. And like every Thursday, I like coach B2B SaaS founders on just like how to think through this in our academy. But like, it's a constant trend. Like, okay, how many times do you have to say this? Like, pick one, and then everything gets a lot easier. But it's hard to do that. It's not an easy, intuitive thing to say, we're going to hunker down and focus on this ideal user. And for all the horizontal platforms out there, it's like, okay, yeah, they think like that's the end of the world. But it's like, start with one. You need to have people that actually love your product, raving fans, create that, and then you can branch out. It's just like the standard, what Jeffrey Amore mentions in Crossing the Chasm. It's like, find your beachhead, dominate it, and then kind of focus on to the other ones. And so I think the best product-led companies do that really well, because what we're talking about is like, you don't have the luxury of a salesperson to kind of massage that, be like, oh, that's your use case. Okay, let me show you how you could do that in this product. It's like in the product experience, it's not there. I don't get it. And they're gone. So they're not coming back. So it's a much higher bar to make work.
Maybe a subsequent question to what Peter was trying to allude at. Wes, have you seen this, that simplifying onboarding for maybe a $10 a month or maybe $50, $100 a month product is very different than $1,000, $2,000 or $10K, $100K a year kind of an ACV product? Do you see in the market simplifying this onboarding experiences, are regardless of the fact whether they want to go to the PLG motion to do a primary self-serve revenue selling or the sales-led motion, are you seeing that simplifying onboarding is becoming a mainstay, becoming table stakes for any product yet? Or is it that it's only touted, the horns touted only for the self-serve revenue? Keep it simple for $10, $50, $100 a month. Beyond that, it's okay to add a little more friction and so on and so forth. I'll tell you why. Amplitude, Mixpanel, whole bunch of other companies have extremely difficult onboarding, but the price tags are also very high. For anyone who's a price tag which is low, right, they are focusing a lot more on simplified onboarding. So maybe if you could explain, where does simplified onboarding fit into the larger spectrum? Typical large B2B SaaS companies with higher ACVs, does it fit there? Or does it work more in the prosumer space with low cost MRR based revenue?
Yeah, I would take this all the way back to, what is your strategy to win? So this is the first component of the Product-Led Playbook, because it's really underrated. The one question there is like, how are we going to win in our space? So let's take Amplitude as an example. One of our Product-Led implementers loves Amplitude. He used it in the past at other companies he's worked with. But when we're recommending it to a potential client, they're like, yeah, free plan is okay. And then at the minute you want to use anything useful, $36,000 is the entry level price. And so it's like, okay, does onboarding change? What is this? And then if you go back to what is probably Amplitude's ideal customer, it's not that size of company. And they're going 10 million beyonds in a lot of cases. And so they are focused more on that part. So the way they're going to approach that onboarding could be completely different. They could have concierge, hey, we could set it up for you, all those fun things, because that's who they're targeting and that's what that looks like. But I think a really important thing is one, you got to super clear on where you're going to play, because that will impact how you're going to onboard. If you're going after really big companies and everything else, you've got a lot more options, and that's great. Another example, one of our clients, they're doing HIPAA email compliance for mental health professionals. And so the product is really cool. You can just use Gmail or G Suite or Outlook, and it just makes it HIPAA compliant. However, the product setup is a pain in the butt. And you got to go into your domain registrar and change up some things. And these mental health professionals are like, oh my God, I'd rather do therapy all day than this. And so that's a challenge where it's how do we win in this market? And they decided, okay, let's make our onboarding as simple as we can. But when we were working with them on this, we're let's ask them a question right at the beginning. Do you just want us to set this up with you? And it just books to a Calendly call, and we have their customer support team actually just do it with them. And that is fantastic because their churn is like ridiculously low. So it's truly a one-time setup kind of product. And so that goes back to how are they going to win? What is a compelling offer for them that would resonate with people that actually hate this stuff? It's like, we'll do it for you, don't worry. So that's how I think about onboarding in a more strategic way, other than like, hey, let's just get people to value the fastest. Sometimes that is your way you're going to win. And it's the people approach, but we're just going to subset the stuff they don't know, the stuff they don't like with someone who's experienced, who just does that for people.
Yeah, super. I know Vincent had some questions and thoughts about pricing and packaging. And usually most companies think about pricing and packaging after they have built free trials. And PLG companies, you probably recommend that he start thinking from the very top, look the transparent pricing. Vincent, please take it away.
Yeah, thanks. So, of course, I'm always thinking about the objections that are coming from salespeople when talking about PLG, right? Because that is a world I spend a lot of time in. Now, one of the big objections is always transparency of pricing, right? And it came up a few times now already. Like $10 a month, sure. $100 a month doesn't scare anybody. But what about $1,000 a month, 3,000? So is there a moment at which you would say pricing shouldn't be transparent? Or is there even a moment where you say, well, you should probably just not be doing PLG?
Yeah, this is a good one, because back to like the amplitude example is like, how many self-serve sales do we think they're actually getting? Probably very few. Like, oh yeah, a year ago, 36K, like boom, done. Very unrealistic for most people. And then you think about, okay, is there like this like perfect range? Like, is it like 250? That's like, good. And I've seen companies do that. There's also companies that are higher than that. But what I would really kind of take a step back at is, do you have really good value metrics identified? And the reason why I love value metrics is because, let's say it's like per contact or it's per widget you get to use in the product. And the value metric will allow you to charge at a lower rate and eventually work up to a much, much higher rate. And so every time I see a company I'm thinking of one right now, that's why I'm laughing. I'm like, when you see that happen, you're like, you haven't identified that value metric. And so you just feel like you got to charge like whatever that 3K, 10K a month. And that's very hard to kind of get people to jump up. And one of the rules, like the framework we have, the value ladder framework for pricing, is just you shouldn't have these huge jumps in pricing. It should feel like a progression, like one ladder step to the next ladder step. When it's like from 1 to like 10, it's like, how many people are going to be able to jump that? Very few, unless they're like freakishly tall like me, then maybe. But that's just something I kind of think about. Is like, do you know your value metrics? That's the first step. But what you're mentioning, GP, about the integration of pricing and into your model, it was so interesting. So when I was writing the Product-Led Playbook, I like rewrote those two sections a lot, because I was like, oh, they're like intertwined. Like your free model and your pricing, they should be built off of that same foundation. And so when we were doing the user component before the model component, we identified, we're like, okay, you have your ideal user, your like user end game. Let's break it down into like 3 levels. So you got like level 1, level 2, level 3, and then like they accomplish the big outcome. So once you do that, then you can kind of like break down level 1, which is going to be your free plan. And like you list out all the challenges they're going to have to overcome. And then you just kind of break down, okay, what are the solutions that we need to actually succeed with that? And then once you get to the model, you're like, is it a free trial for him? Like, it doesn't matter that much. It's like they need this stuff to succeed, to get to that next level. And then the level 2 is really your pricing. And you've actually already done the hardest work, where it's like, this is our model for level 2. This is the core outcome. This is the challenges. This is the solutions. The only thing that's missing now, so we got to like tighten it up a little bit, make it like external, simple, and make sure we have the value metrics clearly outlined, like how many units in the free model, the intermediate, the advanced. And then it's like, all right, we're good to go. We just got to find the ideal price point for each of these plans, and simple pricing page, have that all locked in, and we're good to go. So it's a little bit of a tangent, but I just want to share that because they're so intertwined, the model and pricing component.
So one of the common things in PLG is that you do this land and expand, right? So you want people to get in, to start using maybe their initial use case first, and then they'll start using more of the product that they maybe didn't come for, but seems to be adjacent use cases or additional and so on. I love that part of the model, but it's also really hard to plan as a company, right? Because you don't know how you will expand. This is something you will learn sometimes over only 1 or 2 years. How do you handle that uncertainty when you're working with companies?
Is the uncertainty more around like, okay, are people going to use 10 units this month versus 100 units, or is it like something else?
Yes. So someone will come in and they'll have their initial use case. They might buy your first plan, but you don't know yet if they're going to buy your second plan or if they will get into. Typically, you'll come in with a lower pricing than if someone sells this through sales, right? So, yep. And that you do that by offering a lower volume of credits, of usage, of something like that. But at the same time, you also need to become a profitable business. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, so that would be looking through the value metrics side of things. And so you should have at some point, like some value metric, ideally for most companies, where it's like, okay, from plan free to paid, let's say it's like 10 contacts. That's not a great free model, but 10 free contacts for this email marketing product. So then it's like to go from the paid plan now that you're on it, you got 10 contacts to 100 contacts. That's the range. And so when people are getting up to like, let's say 70% of usage, we might reach out and say, hey, just a heads up, like once you hit over 100 contacts, this is what's going to happen. And would you like to upgrade now? Or we can lock in like a great deal or something like that for this new plan that you would need to send more emails and automate all these things. And so if you know that usage, and then you can set those key usage indicators to monitor. And that's where like you could have your sales integrated into the product data to actually just better assist some of these people to make sure like, oh yeah, we're not just going to cut off your email once you hit that limit.
Right, because that's a concern from customers, right? They don't know what they're going to use yet. And I think exactly what you're saying there. Yeah. So warning them on time and working with them basically is what you're saying, right?
Can we hit
always, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Can we hit a couple of the controversial areas like reverse funnel or the free to enterprise jump in pricing and packaging? And this is to the room. Is there a consensus of opinion on it? Is there a place where they're most appropriate and places where they're not appropriate at all?
Yeah, I think there are many controversial questions it's going on in my head. All the way from should we do free or not? If it is a larger deal, let's say, I think Wes mentioned about there's a plan number 1, and then there's a massive jump to plan number 2. Sales compensation essentially dictates that the guy who's trying to get to plan number 2, sellers will sell plan number 2, right? Subscription-based pricing versus usage-based pricing indicate that, hey, if you know your value metric around it, do you know, I think that's the right prodding strategy. Do you know what's your value metric? And typically, most people don't know that. So they will go ahead and say, hey, here's a yearly package, yearly subscription plan. And here's the baseline estimated usage. And regardless of your usage, this is what we will sell. So subscription plans or tier-based plans versus usage-based plan. Big controversy around that. Versus the enterprise plans. I think, Peter, you alluded to, hey, it's a prosumer kind of a plan, but if you're a large enterprise, we're going to jack up the price by maybe 20 times or 30 times of it. I think there is a discomfort to that, right? So maybe let's take maybe 1 or 2 of them. Wes, question to you. What do you see out there? Customers coming in from a self-serve motion, they sign up to the product, they try that, and you give them some transparent pricing. But enterprise now is trying to use the product. You'll say, hey, give me a call, and then you give them X or 20X of that particular pricing. Justifiable? Is that a trend that's going away? Or is that still a significant trend where if you're an enterprise, I'll sell you an SSO package with enterprise SSO, and we'll jack up the price by 10x. What do you see out there?
I'm sure Vincent, pretty good perspective. Love to hear your take.
Sure, yeah. So what I'm seeing in the market is that when you get to larger customers, like enterprise level, they don't want to deal with usage. They just don't want to at that point. They'd rather pay a higher flat fee. So it's no longer SSO or those kind of things. It's like, no, I just want to have this thing. I want to know what it costs. Even if it costs more, I don't want to worry about this. I have my budget. This is what I can pay, right? Whereas if you're on the, not even SMB, but also on the mid, someone who just wants to spend less, that they're actually much more on that optimization side of like, okay, I'll optimize my usage. I might even keep track of it. So I do see that discrepancy in the market. Yeah.
Yeah, Peter, that was what you're asking, right? Enterprise versus self-serve. You're on mute.
There are these outliers that like the reverse funnel, basically having an enterprise account that at some timeout goes to a free plan, and there's no middle ground. And then the other avenue, and I see this in a lot of organizations, I've been in multiple that are this way, that have a free plan and they have enterprise option. And I always joke that it's just a self-guided demo at that point, or it defeats an educational inbound. But and this is the opinion I'm trying to get. I'm trying to understand from the true practitioners, is this actually PLG or is this just PLM, product-led marketing?
Yeah, like I'm kind of imagining this one where it's like you sign up for a free motion, let's say, and you go into the product, you're like, oh yeah, this is great, I want to buy it kind of thing. And like, it's just the sales process. Is that what you're referring to?
Exactly.
So this is like, it's a gray area, like, because it's like going in the direction of like product-led. They're doing some things, right? They have the free motion, they have that. Usually though, what I find is when you sign up, it's usually not that good. Like onboarding wise, they haven't thought about this. They don't actually have those capabilities internally. They're just like, this is a great idea. It's a great call to action. Let's do it. And so, yeah, it's very common. And then what I would bring it back to is like becoming product led is really where it's like your acquisition is product led, your engagement is product led, your monetization is also product led. So if you got like 2 out of 3, it's like, great job. Like, that's going in the right direction. Eventually you get like 3 out of 3, fantastic. And the best is like you get to the 4th part, which is like the entire organization is product led. You have the right capabilities, you built them internally to support this and do it at a really, really high level. Because it's the thing like that I think a lot of companies don't think about when they make this transition from sales led to product led, is that it's not just like the call to action. It's not just a free trial, free moment. It's not just onboarding and everything else. It's like you're building a new company that has to do some things much, much better than you're currently doing in some specific areas. And each of those 9 components I outlined in the Product-Led Playbook is actually a capability. Your strategy, understanding your ideal user, your model, your offer, your onboarding, your pricing, your data, your process, your growth process to optimize things, and your team. Those are all capabilities you got to integrate and improve on to make it work.
I do think, though, that for many companies that are out there today, that they're going to land up somewhere in the middle, like what Peter was saying just now, right? They're going to want to apply those things that you're mentioning, Wes, and they're going to find that from where they are, some things might work and some things might not, because they have existing revenue that might get at risk. So that's, I think, also the interesting development. Like, is it really being product-led or sales-led, or is it about using the product-led techniques? Of course, the ultimate thing being fully product-led, which is how you beautifully describe it. But even if not, maybe you can take parts of it in the different parts of your process already, right? And be on that journey and go as far as it makes sense for your business, right?
Yeah. And I would add too, like I would recommend that. Like, start where you can start and start seeing value. Like, for instance, a lot of the growth like PMs that I've got to know, it's like, okay, when they start going into a sales-led company and stuff like that, they're not like shaking up the free motion or anything. They don't even have one at that stage. They're like, what are the quick wins we could do with the product-led thinking to make this work? Like, let's go find expansion opportunities and just like surface them from the product side of things. Let's get some of that revenue. We can now say, hey, this is like product-led revenue that we can attribute to what we did here. And this is now helping our team become more effective. And let's take some other swings in other areas where there's revenue to be had with this sales-led mindset. And that's how you really win over a lot of other people too.
Yeah, I think the controversial part about this is if you have a sales team, in your early stage company, maybe 1, 2, 3 million in revenue, and you have some sales team, maybe the founders and maybe 1 or 2 sales guys in the team, and you're building a product-led product, right? Which is self-servable, self-serve acquisition, self-serve activation. I think Wes, like you mentioned about self-serve monetization, self-serve engagement. The effort to do that is high, right? But on the other side, the sales guy would come back and say, hey, you know what? I talked to this particular customer. This is my ICP. I'm going to do a quick demo. I'm going to sell. 1 out of 10 people he talks to buy. So which means that over time, the founders are thinking that, hey, you know what? If that is what's happening, building a product-led business is going to be extremely difficult. Let me go with what I get, right? Which is a sales-led approach. If we are closing on 10%, 20%, 30% of the qualified deals, let's go increase the efficiency of that and let's go that particular approach. So I think question to you. Sorry, go ahead.
Because I want to double take on one thing that I think is really important that you pointed out here, which is that if you're going down the sales-led path, it's easy to get started but it's hard to scale because it's a lot more people-centric. Whereas in a product-led company, it's a lot harder to get started, but it's a lot easier to scale because the product is doing the majority of the heavy lifting. That all goes back to the premise that as a product-led company, what you're really building is the product is the machine, not your team. The team is super helpful and super capable and all that stuff, but what's doing the majority of the work that's creating the leverage for you to have like a super high revenue per employee is the product.
This is interesting.
I have a follow-on to that, actually, if that's okay. Sorry, I didn't unmute quick enough.
So, go ahead, Vincent.
What I hear, though, from many companies, and I'm curious how you've seen that, is that still in the beginning, it is faster to use a sales-like process to gather that feedback, right? Because as you said, you got to pick something. You got to say, okay, this is the user I'm going for. This is what I'm going to optimize for. This is what they want. Yeah. And it's just much faster to talk with people and to try and sell it to them. And then based on that, build that onboarding experience. Is that how you do it? Or do you have another approach there?
I actually highly recommend that. Like I always tell even like our founders we work with, I'm like, please do sales, founder-led sales, at least at the beginning, like get 10, 20, 30 customers, ideally, and really understand those pain points, see who is really successful, and then think about what is the most effective go-to-market motion to scale this company. Yeah. I'll give you an example. Like one of our clients, it's a really like niche kind of company where it's like, if you're like a balloon decor kind of company, you can design it visually and it's really fun, but it's like, for that product to work, like they're selling like $300 kind of balloon installments. It's like, it's not really going to be like a salesperson ideally going through all that setup and like, here's how to set up your plan. It's like, it's going to have to be a product-led go-to-market motion to efficiently scale and serve that specific market. So that's where that decision would come. You have some level of product market fit, not complete product market fit, but then you're trying to test out what is our best go-to-market motion to scale.
Yeah, so you still got to talk with your customers, right? And I think that's sometimes a misconception that you can just build this. I have an idea, I'm going to build it, but no, you have to still be out there and have those interactions, even though that's not your go-to-market motion that you're building.
For sure. Yeah, and even when you do have a product motion, still do that. Still talk to customers, please.
Yeah, I like how, Wes, you put it. Start with the sales-led approach, get to baseline product market fit, know your users and buyers, and use PLG tactics to actually scale, right? Don't start with the PLG because it's going to be very difficult to build towards it. Get your baseline, get some revenue, find out who your ideal customers are, and then use product-led motions to actually grow and scale at the lowest CAC and all the good things that you tell about. I know, by the way, we are almost out of time. We had a lot of conversation. We want to talk about PLG data, product-led organization. For the listeners, we will probably come back and touch upon some of these things. But in the meantime, Wes Bush is launching very soon. And all of the questions about product-led organization, why should you focus on implementing a strategy across your entire organization, not just marketing? Product-led growth is not necessarily only a marketing thing or only a product thing. And Wes essentially talks about how the entire organization should be involved, and it should be a strategy driven really from the top, not necessarily only from the product team or the marketing team. So please read more about all of that into his upcoming book launch. We will post this particular recording very close to that. And thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Wes, Vincent, and Peter, for a wonderful conversation. We should probably circle back sometime later again after the book's launch and maybe take one of these topics or each of these topics and go into a lot more details over time. Again, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
And GP, I want you to know, you stand alone. I've got a book out too.
I stand alone.
Library of Congress. Yep.
Okay. All right. I stand corrected. I'm going to go use ChatGPT tonight. All right. Thank you, guys.